if I'm listening to music and I breathe with it, I find that is a really quick way to calm my nervous system. If you're a singer or woodwind player, you have to use your breath. So being a string player, to understand the phrasing of the music, and it's all about the breath.
Hello and welcome to Move to Live with me, Akram Khan, brought to you by our friends at Marquee TV, the streaming platform that allows you to see stunning performances from across the arts, wherever you happen to be. I've been dancing for as long as I can remember, and movement has an effect on just about everything for me. But you don't have to be a dancer to realize that the way our bodies move affects other things in life, how we relate to others perhaps, or our state of mind. In today's podcast, I'm talking with the wonderful violinist and author Izzy Judd about movement and her life. She has lived through some incredibly challenging times. There's an amazing openness and honesty to her that I can't wait to share with you. Hello, Izzy. Thank you for joining us. I've been wanting to ask so many questions, but first of all, congratulations on the release of your new album.
Yeah, so my EP Moments has just recently been released. And it was interesting. I think growing up, music was everything. I mean, it was just all around us and my family growing up. And then through becoming a mum, I sort of lost my way with music and playing my violin. And until I realised that actually it was really soothing for me and my baby. So I decided to pick my violin up more and play well-known tunes in the style of lullabies.
Oh, is this what the new album as well?
Yeah, so it's
amazing.
So it's just an EP. So there's 6 tracks on there, and it really is just about reconnecting to myself and sharing music, which is something I have always loved and is part of me.
Yeah, and the launch. What was interesting was that the album launch. It's an event that combines yoga and music. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by yoga and mindfulness and meditation. And I was really interested how music affects people's emotions. Music without lyrics. And if people sit and listen to a piece of music and only really have their thoughts, I think interesting things show up for people, and emotional music takes you to places. So I was quite kind of keen to mix two of the things that I love and to give a group of really brilliant women the space to come and just have a moment for them. And it was, really interesting kind of collaboration.
It's kind of a first, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about how I could expand on it, because it definitely brings something a bit different, having live music with yoga.
Yeah. It's funny because as an Indian classical dancer, before you learn dance, for 2 years you learn music because you're fundamentally a musician, but your instrument is your body. Do you feel the same way when you were growing up as a child, learning the violin? Was your body also an instrument or an extension? Was the violin an extension or your body an extension of movement?
So recently I've been watching videos back of me playing as a child when I was putting together things for Moments for my new music. And very naturally and instinctively, I moved when I played. Yeah. I swayed and I moved. And I remember being told to not move so much because, technically when I was learning my instrument that it might affect. But that it was such a naturally instinctive thing to do. And you're right, your body becomes part of your instrument and you feel it. And so your body responds to that.
But how did you deal with someone telling you, or was it very young when they told you to stop moving and be still when you're learning the technique?
I just remember teachers saying that it might be easier if technically to be more still. So like if I'm practicing scales or studies.
Yeah.
And I had different styles of teachers. But actually, when I went to Cheetham School of Music in Manchester, and I was taught by Wenjo Lee, and he wasn't the greatest violinist, but he was the greatest teacher. He was able to explain what you needed to do. Because sometimes if somebody shows you something, it's a real gift to be able to verbally explain. Because it's all very well someone just picks up the violin and goes, it's like this, but it's like, but how? So he was a fantastic teacher technically. But then when I moved to Howard Davis at the Royal Academy, I felt very free. He made me feel, I'd sort of had the technical grounding, but then he gave me the moment to sort of feel free and expressive, and there was no sort of right or wrong behind the technique. It was much more about feeling. But it was probably appropriate to do it that way round, to sort of set the groundwork of technique. But it was always very difficult for me to be still.
It's almost like somebody asking me, and that would be my answer as a child. Really hard to find stillness in my body, especially behind a desk. In school was the hardest thing.
Do you know, having watched, I have a daughter and two sons. And my daughter, she loves to move, she loves to dance, she loves to express herself. But she has an ability to be able to sit and focus on her work.
Right.
But my son needs to move. So when I'm reading with him, for example, I get him to tap a drum pad.
Oh, wow.
So that to ask him to sit still is so difficult. And you think there's sort of this one way that's supposed to fit. And putting some children sitting, and actually I've got this hilarious video of Kit saying, and we have to sit down for maths, and then we have to sit down at lunch, then we have to sit, and he wants to move. And finds it incredibly difficult to be still. So I'm always having to think of ways for him to learn with movement.
Through movement, or with movement, absolutely. I mean, I wish our culture or our society embraced that earlier. When I was growing up, I was just regarded as someone who's a problem child. The term ADHD didn't exist. I don't know if I have it or had it, but I was really the problem child. So, and you're talking about your son, which is exactly as my son is, who learns while we're walking around the kitchen cabinet, the island. And I figured that's the way he learns. So he memorizes and learns, sentences and words or whatever he has to learn. But if I ask him to sit down and learn it, he starts to literally have a meltdown. And I feel education has to change. The way we teach our children, I think, has to change. I mean, you have 3, right?
I have 3.
Are they all involved in music?
So Lola plays the violin, and she loves to dance, and she is like me, when she plays the violin, she has that kind of sway. Kit is fascinated by kind of guitar and drums, and he listens to all sorts of like Green Day and Nirvana, and he's only 6, and he just absorbs my husband's music. Obviously Harry's a drummer in a band, and his bandmates play guitar, and they've helped Kit work stuff out and learn things. So he loves music. And then my youngest, Lockie, there's a lot of drumming, tapping things going on. So, I think I seem to have moved more into that territory rather than the classical territory.
As a child, like when you were very young, who chose the violin? Did you choose the violin, or was it your parents?
I can't remember. So
Because you have a family full of musicians, right?
Yes. So my parents are actually woodwind players. So Dad played the clarinet and learnt, his father was a clarinetist in the Ulster Symphony Orchestra in Ireland. And he used to teach the clarinet, but refused to teach my dad, and was very keen that my dad chose a different career path. But my dad would listen through the floor of his bedroom to his father teaching below, and taught himself to play the clarinet. My mum played bassoon. And so I think they were quite keen for us to learn string instruments, so that they were a bit of a step away from knowing too much. So Rupert, my oldest brother, started on violin, and Magnus played violin, Guy the cello. And then I think I just wanted a little violin like my brothers. And I think at the age of 3 or 4, I was given a tiny violin. I think so. I actually can't remember exactly, but it was probably more that I wanted to be like my brothers.
And you have 3 brothers?
Yes.
And how was it growing up? Are you the youngest?
Yeah.
So how was it growing up with 3 brothers?
Yes. Well, I've always found male company easier than lots of females. They were always very straightforward, the boys, and it was very busy and very noisy. But they are incredibly loving and very protective. But they actually went to be choristers at the age of 9 at King's. So
King's?
In Cambridge.
Yeah. Oh.
King's College. Yeah.
And what's chorister? Sorry, I should know.
Chorister, so a singer.
Oh.
So little kind of choir boys, I suppose.
All 3 of them?
All 3 of them
Wow.
left at the age of 9.
Amazing.
So sort of one by one they went. And the girls at that time weren't choristers. And so I was at home. And that was, I think about it now, my 2 are very close. And I was very, very close to Guy, and how it suddenly felt when he left and not having them around so much. But I used to go to the services on a Sunday, and King's Chapel is absolutely extraordinary. And there's this stained glass window, and I remember just staring at it and the detail. And it was just an amazing experience growing up listening to them sing. And I think they would say that was the kind of core of their learning, singing.
I think your parents must be, I don't know, I mean, I'm guessing your parents must be in a way so kind of chuffed that the whole family is in the music industry and the music world. Whereas my children, I mean, they're too soon, but then definitely not in the dance world. I mean, they think they're dancing. I don't know what to call it.
Is it something you've encouraged or sort of, no?
No, I want them to move, but I don't necessarily want them to dance. I think the more known I became, the more I didn't want to push them at all into dance, because I just don't want them to be compared just I don't want them to feel like there's this pressure. So no, I didn't encourage them at all. But I want them to move. I think moving is so important. My son once stopped moving at 4 because opera was on. And he just turned and he watched the screen for 2 hours. And I was like, great, we're going to have an opera singer or something in the opera. Has that happened with your children, where they're kind of seen something or drawn to something where they're still, because they're so in love with it? That's not to do with music necessarily.
So I was just thinking when you were talking there about how because I grew up and music was
Everywhere.
as normal to us as brushing our teeth.
Right.
And I remember being on a train and someone asking me what a violin was, and me just being like, what do you mean you don't know what? Because it was just so normal. And then when you have your own children, I was talking to my brother about this, that just because it's been your path doesn't mean that it's going to be theirs. And it's a difficult one to navigate because, at my daughter's age, I was up doing an hour's practice before school and an hour's practice after school.
Sorry.
At age 8.
Wow.
Like the dedication and the time that my parents put in. and they drove me into London twice a week for lessons. And I never, I loved it. Like it wasn't like it was a chore. I was a girl that wanted to please and wanted to work hard, and I enjoyed it. So when you've got a child where you can see they've got the ability, but you're then married to somebody who comes from a very different background and who didn't have that same sort of musical upbringing, who's thinking, why are you spending, why does she need to practice? I'm like, well, if you're going to learn an instrument, you practice every day. And he's like, she should have a day off. It was just so interesting having this conversation. And like, even whilst I was teaching her, thinking, my perfectionism and my own, making sure the bow's straight and all these things that I want to tell her. But she's a kid who, when you don't want them to lose the joy or the love or, for it. And so I guess it has been a bit of a conscious decision now to just, change the way I think about it and remember that she's her own identity and her own person.
It's so difficult, right?
Sorry, but you were asking me about how, whether there was anything that sort of took my children's attention. I mean, certainly when Kit, my middle boy, watched Harry and his band members do gigs, he could tell me exactly which guitar they were playing. He knew exactly which song was coming next. He was totally fixated and that was quite amazing.
Really invested in it.
Really invested in it.
But I want to go back to what you said about, because I struggle with this a lot, with my wife actually, who went through similar experience to me, but yet is contradictory to me when it comes to children. And now I've stepped away because, and I don't know what's right and wrong. My mother pushed me, regardless. And once I got to the class, I loved it. But I was pushed. It didn't come like with eager, like oh, I can't wait to go to class.
Yeah.
Rehearsals were a chore. It was not until I did work with Peter Brook at the age of 13, where for a year and a half, which changed my life. Because I was amongst people who didn't switch off, really. They were obsessed with theatre and storytelling. But you obviously seem to be someone who grew up loving the ritual of training.
I liked the order of it.
Yeah.
I liked the routine.
Yeah.
Which is just so me, likes being in control. And I liked really learning and the reward. And I liked the competitive element of, doing festivals and things like that. And then I loved playing in orchestras and being surrounded, and there was so much of it. I mean, I'm sure there were times when I didn't want to practice, of course, but I don't look back and think I was made to do this. But of course, I mean, my parents, of course, mum was up, with me an hour before school and after school. So that doesn't just happen without a parent commitment. And it's a big commitment to give your children that time. And I would say my parents equally, for all four of us, gave us the same opportunities and the same choices. But we're four very different personalities. And it's really interesting how you've got four children who each had an ability, but where the mind comes into it, and it's the mental strength and that determination and that competitive nature. And then also, I mean, my oldest brother, Rupert, he was just so naturally gifted and could just get away with, very little practice and always do well. And my youngest of my three brothers, Guy, was just fiercely determined and would just work and work and work, and still is that way. So I think it's interesting how the mind also, your mind plays a part in how you progress with the opportunities that you're given. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I mean, my mum, she would always, probably similarly to your mum, you know, would kind of be perhaps pushy, but in a way of, if you're going to succeed and I can see an ability that needs nurturing, you know, she would say to me, no child wants to practice. No child is going to willingly go and, you know, so, and then you've got obviously yourself and your partner and where you come to with each other on that.
Yeah, there's always a different entry point of how to bring up children, I suppose, depending on one's experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming from what you've told me, Harry's and your experience of childhood are completely different.
Or just that his, you know, he ended up in a pop band and just was he actually loved sport, Harry, and was a really, really good cricketer. But obviously this other opportunity came his way. And he's sort of one of those annoying people that just is just really good at lots of things.
Right.
And so, you know, he became a drummer young and that became his career. It's more that there was such a heavy focus in our family of music.
I wanted to ask you about your brother Rupert and the accident that had occurred. Maybe to ask you more about how it changed or transformed you and the family, and how did you navigate yourself through that? Because I often talk about ruptures or traumas because the body carries that. A lot of my work is about trauma, but not necessarily in a negative way. It's how it's an opportunity for change, and change is hard because sometimes change happens that you don't willingly design, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Rupert suffered a serious head injury. He had a car accident when he was 17 and he was in his first year at music college. And I was 12, so, you know, relatively young. And it was extremely traumatic because his injuries were so extreme. My parents were asked whether to turn the life support off within the first 24 hours. And as from my point of view, I was trying to put the puzzle together and trying to understand it all. And as you say, I think trauma, it does sit with you. You know, even when you ask me the question, I immediately get this sensation in my stomach when I think about the accident and obviously where I hold a lot of that. And I've had anxiety, which is, again, I'm sure, a response to everything that happened. At the time, there wasn't that much support given to families, and naturally, you rally around the person who is in immediate need, which is obviously was at the time was Rupert. And music really was our way of communicating. So we didn't talk very much about it, but we did lots of concert fundraising, and my brother, my youngest brother, Guy, you know, threw himself into his practice room, and music just became a language when words were too difficult to speak. But music we could always express ourselves through that. And despite the damage which Rupert had in his brain, the part of the brain needed with music was still intact. So when he was in intensive care, and then as he came out of intensive care, we used to play him a lot of music. And there was one occasion where my dad took his French horn. And at that point, we hadn't had any communication from Rupert or any words or anything. But he started to move his hands on the horn to the music, which was our first feeling of, there was something going on, because at that point we didn't know. And so music is something even now Rupert can still play he plays in the local band, and through lockdown, he had a wonderful carer who played the piano. So they used to, send us lots of videos of them jamming together. So I think, really music has been the glue that's helped my family through that trauma. However, I think there's still personally a lot of work that I'm still doing to unpick, because every kind of milestone you get to, whether that's when I got married or when I had children, or I've recently turned 40, there's these moments where your grief or how you feel sort of evolves or changes. And it's just checking in on that you're, on top of the grief and still checking in. I always found a huge amount of comfort from my grandmother, who I was very, very close to, and felt that she was a very solid, reliable person who had experienced so much, and so much loss and war, and but she was so interesting, and I used to just love listening to her talk. And she always gave me her time. There was just always time. And I've realised now, I wish I could have thanked her for that, because that is so important.
So there really is a lineage of 3 generations of 1, 2, 3 generations, of connection of women in your life, right from your grandmother to your mother to you,
yes,
and now to your daughter.
Yes.
I always say I find it extraordinary how we see ourselves as when we're parents, not just within our children, but how we are so much of our parents when we become parents.
Yeah. And I mean, I say to Harry that I've never understood him more since having our son. It's literally like having him in child form.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That, in terms of understanding him.
Yeah.
And so I think also it's difficult when it's like looking at yourself in the mirror with a child and thinking, oh my goodness, I've given you all these things.
I wanted to ask you about, you've talked about in the past about the importance of breath and of noticing how our breathing. How does this connect with being a musician? I mean, I know your parents use breath with the very instruments that they play. And I always refer in my interviews that every breath is a rejection to death. It's
That's very powerful.
Yeah. How do you relate to breath in your own playing as a musician?
Well, breathing really, for me, to be honest, has been a lot more to do with learning to live with anxiety. And I read an amazing book by John Kabat-Zinn called Calming Your Anxious Mind when I was in my 20s and having a really bad kind of bout of anxiety. And this feeling or this knowledge that you could just be present was such a completely new way of thinking for me, because I was always projecting the future, and the narrative going on in my head was always, this catastrophizing and this fear and this sort of confirming I suppose, giving the anxiety space to feed and grow. And one of the key things, obviously, to connect mind and body, or the quickest way to connect mind and body, is through breath. And so I suppose when it comes to music, if you're in a situation where you're about to perform live and the adrenaline and the nerves and the cortisol and everything is rushing around you, which is appropriate, but you still want to feel a certain level of steadiness to be able to perform. And so for me, that's the breathing that comes into to playing music. Also, listening to music, if I'm listening to music and I breathe with it, I find that is a really quick way to calm my nervous system. A classical piece of music, and that's obviously calm and gentle, and just to breathe in time with the music, and as you're saying, if you're a singer or woodwind player, you have to use your breath. So being a string player, to understand the phrasing of the music, and it's all about the breath, and using sort of meditation and music and mindfulness is all connected. And I guess that goes back to why I wanted to use sort of yoga and that sort of well-being as part of my album launch. And
so yoga, do you practice yoga yourself?
I would say I do sort of stretch yoga. So it's movement, isn't it? And
do you do that daily?
I do, yeah. I have a little kind of 10-minute thing that I do. And then I do meditation. But, you can meditate, you can be mindful and meditate with, I do it while I'm walking. You don't have to be still. And I think sometimes it's that misconception of needing to be still and to stop your mind, when actually the thoughts will come and go, and it's learning to breathe through them and, acknowledge and let them go, and catching your mind when it's starting to run away with you with those anxious thoughts.
I always say anxiety exists in two places, the past and the future. It does not exist in the present. And the special thing about stage is, people always ask, people not always, but most often ask me, is the stage sacred or spiritual? I said the only reason it feels spiritual or magical, some people use the word magical, is not because the space is magical. It's because 1,500 people in the audience, plus yourself, have chosen to listen to that space, to be in the present. And when you're in the present collectively, it's so powerful. And for the first time, you start to hear not just your breath, but your breath amongst 1,500 people, with the 1,500 people in chorus, especially that moment when it's blackout and there's silence. I remember performing at the Olympic opening ceremony, and it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It was Emily Sander, who was about to sing, and we were about to perform. But the audience went quiet, 80,000 people in the stadium. And that was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. It was terrifying. It was the 80,000 people coming together not in stillness, but in a meditative form. Danny Ball was very smart. What he did, very beautifully crafted, the way he told the story. Just before we came on, it was the remembrance of people who had passed away.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You performed in big places. We were just talking about this before we came to do this podcast, where I had seen you in 2008 on Britain's Got Talent. I was sitting with my mum, and I remember it because I was like, I was looking for my company, a quartet. And then suddenly it was electric quartet, right?
Yeah.
How was that experience? Because that's another world, right? Coming out of Royal Academy of Music, it's a concert is different to Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah. So when Rupert had his accident, I was at my local school. I was having violin lessons, but I was also doing lots of dance, lots of drama. I was very interested in performing arts generally. And when Rupert had his accident, it made sense really for me to go and join my brothers at school, music school in Manchester, which kind of stopped all my other things that I love doing. And so in my upper sixth at school, I kind of had a bit of a meltdown and said to my mum, you know, I don't know if I just want to play the violin. And she was like, right, come home, come and finish your A-levels, you know, locally. Let's just take a pause. And then an ad came up to join an electric string quartet, which Mum found. That's the thing. She'd just be really proactive like that. Just be like, right, what can we do? And so I auditioned. And actually that was a band called Wild, who was with Mel Bush, who had managed Vanessa May and Bond. And so it was kind of my first step into the electric violin world. But I was able to express myself more. And it was kind of more of a performance and an act rather than kind of your very kind of straight classical playing. So I sort of then went off into this kind of pop classical crossover world. And then I was asked to be one of the string players on the McFly tour. And it was on that tour that I obviously met my husband.
Okay, right.
And the quartet Escala, because we were the four girls in that quartet. So it was one of those kind of sliding door life moments. And we were gigging as a quartet. And we went on to Britain's Got Talent. And it really was, you know, they sort of go, will you go back to your day job? And it's sort of like, this is our day job. So if this doesn't go well. And it was an amazing experience. And
I mean, it took off, right?
Yeah, we were very lucky. We recorded an album with Trevor Horn, and we basically just did loads of corporate events all over the place. We did a lot of rugby matches, which is that when you're in the middle of a stadium, you know, Twickenham or... and that, as you say, that silence can be very loud before you're starting to play. So yeah.
And you would play the national anthem, or you'd play?
No, we usually played Palladio, which was our kind of, I suppose, signature track. But, you know, I found playing to that size audience much easier than a smaller group of, you know, when you've just got an intimate group of people, that's more terrifying in many ways.
Do you feel that you'd like to go, having children, would you like to go back to that world? Because it is a very different world, right? I mean, I know a little bit about it because of my exposure with through Kylie Minogue or Florence and the Machine. And the dance that is in that world, the commercial world, though they're extraordinary and some of the choreographers are amazing, is that they're predominantly in the back. And that really, really upsets me. There isn't an equality there. Fundamentally, it's about the pop singer. Then secondary is musicians, and then it would be the dancers, you know, in almost a hierarchy of that. If that opportunity came along now, having had children, would you say yes, and would you approach it differently?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at that age, it was exciting, and, you know, it was, I was with my three best mates, and it was an amazing opportunity, but one that I almost didn't see through because my anxiety was just really bad, and I was really struggling, and my mum and my dad were just amazing at kind of carrying me through that moment. But I think now since having children and since recording my own music recently, the sort of freedom to just play the music that I want to play and wear the clothes I want to wear and be completely myself, that's who I want to be, and that's where I feel most at home and most comfortable. And, you know, when you're in a commercial band, you are you are you lose that freedom. And there's 3 other people in the band that have opinions, and you might not share the same opinion from what track you want to play, what you want to record.
But even down to the producer.
Yeah, even exactly.
Who has an image of what the band should be, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when I was, 20, however old I was, it was amazing. It was a great opportunity, and I don't have any regrets. But if someone offered that to me now, I wouldn't do that now.
You'd do it differently.
I do it differently. Yeah. I remember also, you've got to be so careful when you go into that world, because you are scrutinised in many ways, and you lose what it's actually all about.
Yeah.
And you get lifted high and dropped very quickly. And, if you don't have the right people around you, or the stability from your team of people or your family, it can, I think, be quite dangerous, that industry.
My nephew is a dancer, and he's 17, and he's going to the Brit School. And he's wonderful. He's very talented and lovely, but I'm constantly advising him, just giving him that support to say, look, it's magical, but at the same time, think long term. Always think long term, because they're only interested in short term. I want to also go back to something you said several times, and that's anxiety. I wanted to know how you found your way through it. Of course, through music was a part of it. Your family was a part of it. But
well, it's such a kind of deep part of who I am, and it's such a silent part that you face alone most of the time. And I can understand where my fear comes from. Of course, if a family member goes out one night and then they don't come back and they have a serious car accident, and you're thrown into this sort of life or death situation, and you're exposed to it at a young age, and then the repercussions of that, that I can rationalise where the anxiety comes from. But what I find the most challenging about it is actually the physical feelings of anxiety and the sensations that I feel. It's more physical than actually in my mind. It's how my body responds that can feel so uncomfortable, when you're disoriented and you feel that you can't quite ground, and you're shaky, or your chest's tight, but it's those sensations are very familiar to me, and they're very uncomfortable, and they're very silent. And so I guess I have learned that to manage my anxiety is basically a puzzle. And, that puzzle includes mindfulness, medication, music, movement, and all of those things together help me to manage it on a day-to-day basis. And, to anybody listening who has anxiety, it is an incredibly challenging place to be. And, I'm just really grateful that kind of mindfulness and music have been my glue to help me through. And of course, my family and my husband and actually now my children, because they're the greatest teachers of being present. And if you really get into their world, you can really get back to their, reality and this present moment and right now. And, but yeah, it's just part of who I am.
Izzy, you have been so, it's such a privilege listening to you talk. You've been deeply honest and graceful, and shared with us so many insights. I didn't expect you to be so open, really, because it's such a it takes courage. It's been a real learning experience listening to you talk. Thank you so much,
Akram.
Izzy.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Thank you, Izzy.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Move to Live, and do keep an eye out for more episodes here on Marquee TV. And feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. The email address is movetolivepodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on our socials. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So until the next time, goodbye, and please, always keep moving.